Hey everyone, today we are watching a Kim Iverson video. The title of the video is How to Really Opt Out of the Technocratic State to Maintain Your Personal Freedom, which is an interesting topic. Let's see what it's all about.
All right, Derek, a lot of us are really worried about the oncoming, just sort of the technocratic state, the technocracy, the surveillance, the CBDCs, the 15-minute cities. Um, you wrote a book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. I talk a lot about it in the warning sense, but what the hell can we do is a whole different part of the topic. First of all, paint the picture for us right now. Like, you've been researching this for a long time. How I don't know how to phrase this in a way, like on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? Like if 10 is the end and they have full control and they've now, gotten to us, or on a scale of like 1 to 100%, like where do you think we are today versus where we were
Hmm.
5 years ago or even 10 years ago? Does that make sense? Are we getting better? Are we
Yeah.
getting worse? Are they getting more
Um,
control?
I think they are definitely advancing their agendas. I'll say that. As far as let's say like what they are doing, all these different forces and people who would prefer the Klaus Schwabs of the world and
Right.
those folks. I would say as far as their agenda advancing, we're probably at a 6 or 7 if 10 is complete control of everything. Not to say that everything has gone their way, of course, but I mean look around. A lot of the agendas are becoming pretty mainstream after COVID. Vaccine passports quickly morphed into a discussion on digital IDs. We're seeing the explosion of digital identity programs in parts of Africa. Of course, discussion of central bank digital currencies and other forms of government controlled programmable money. These are all agendas that have been promoted by Klaus Schwab since at least his Fourth Industrial Revolution book, and even longer for some other players. So I would say their agenda is advancing, but I also like to think that the people's agenda is also advancing. That is what my book focuses on: how to opt out of the technocratic state. I want to let everybody know they can download it for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. You can purchase it and listen to the audiobook, of course, everywhere else. But if you want to just check it out, PDF version. Um, I wrote this book at the end of 2019 and published it January 30th, 2020, right before COVID happened. And
Right before it got really bad, and then they really wanted to come after us with all the
yeah,
technocracy, right?
I mean, a lot of the stuff I was writing about, it happened 6 months after I published the book. So it was kind of like, okay, but I didn't, predict COVID or that it was going to come in the form of a pandemic. But I knew that
Right.
these agendas were progressing. And the reason I was writing the book is because a lot of my journalism, especially back in Houston, has centered around digital rights and privacy and surveillance. Because in 2013, I was leaked some images from a Houston Police Department officer who was showing me that I was under surveillance for some of my activism. And that essentially just kind of began a journey diving down the rabbit hole, trying to understand what is surveillance technology, what tools are that: Stingray cell phone surveillance technology, heat detection technology, gate detection, facial recognition, all these different things. And so I've been following these technologies and writing articles about it for years, and writing about warnings from people who are much more knowledgeable than me, lawyers and digital rights attorneys, warning as far back as 2017, saying facial recognition is advancing pretty quickly. We should probably think about what's coming next. The fact that, for example, Illinois is the only U.S. state that has any sort of facial recognition protection for your face print, as it's known, which allowed companies like Clearview and others to step in this space, of course, the government as well, and develop these massive databases of all of our face prints as we've been taking selfies for a decade plus now and giving them info. And so I was writing the book kind of partly as a warning of, guys, if you haven't noticed, there's some scary things kind of on the horizon, and also as a guide, or sort of offering some ideas and tips that I personally use in my life. I haven't had a bank account since 2008.
Wow.
I try to stay out of certain systems. I don't use a phone. My partner, she uses a privacy phone. My buddy has a company who does de-Googled privacy phones. So I try very much to stay out of their systems, and other ways that I will keep off the record for now, as much as possible. Because not only because I think that it's what aligns with my principles, because I don't want to feed the war machine. I don't want to feed and support these companies. But I think that's also going to become necessary as they're building this increasingly entrenched, interconnected digital dystopic world where, without a digital ID, without a government wallet that has all of your money and knows everything you're doing, then you won't be able to operate in these mainstream systems. And so I was kind of just asking the question and encouraging our movement, if you will, or people who are thinking about these things, like, well, what comes next? We understand that there's all these bad things coming on. We hear about Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, stuff like that. But what are we doing on our side to make sure that we can continue to stay free and thrive? How do you maintain liberty and privacy in a world that is increasingly throwing those things out the window? And that's kind of what the book was trying to ask, as well as provide.
I think this guy is trying to answer a very interesting question. Um, and I suppose it comes down to, like, is it even possible to avoid the system? Like right now, it is possible, right? Like he obviously hasn't been using a bank since 2008. That must be extremely hard. But essentially, it's still possible. You can have a privacy phone and whatever. But when it gets to the point where you're only allowed to pay using a chip or your phone, is it going to be that easy to avoid? And I suppose, that's what this guy is going to be talking about. And also the thing is avoidance the goal? Or should it be the case that now you can avoid because essentially it's not a part of the system yet. As of yet, the control apparatus has not been built to the point where it is used at every stage throughout the process. They don't know everything just yet, but it is being prepared, certainly, for that to happen. Now, the question becomes, are you supposed to avoid it, or are you supposed to fight it? Let's see what this guy says.
Some answers and some solutions to. And so I published that in 2020, and then I republished it late 2022 with the second edition, which has 5 new post-COVID chapters based on everything that we learned during COVID. Because lockdowns, travel restrictions. When I came to Mexico early in COVID, part of it was building this network of people who are trying to get out of Germany, Australia, Canada, and some of the really bad places, coming to Mexico, because Mexico ended up being one of only 2 nations that had no shots, no quarantines, no things like that. And so
Right.
we started to
The other one.
see, I think it was Nicaragua for a little while. I don't know if
Oh,
they ended
okay.
up holding out, but Mexico stayed all the way that way. And that doesn't mean every part of the country was, completely free. Different. It was kind of decentralized like the US. Some states were a little more forceful about it, others were not. But on a whole, there was no quarantine for foreigners. There was no lockdown, no shutdown. And so a lot of those lessons learned went into the second edition of the book, because as I say in the book, that I do believe we will see climate lockdowns or another pandemic. Or I think essentially that these people, what I call the predator class, have shown their hands. I think that they've shown us the tools that they're willing to use: coercion, firing you, the travel restrictions, all these sort of things that we saw, and that we would be wise to not just kind of sit back and continue on and forget about it until the next time it happens, but perhaps think about the way we're living our lives and the way we interact with digital technology, especially the explosion of AI and video, audio fakery, and how are we going to interact with that? And where's that red line for us? Like, are you willing to submit
Right.
to facial recognition so you can continue to fly? Are you willing to accept the digital ID because you got to keep working your job? And I think COVID was just a preview of that. And we saw some people were willing to move across the country or move states or move or across the world if it meant staying free with their family. And I witnessed this. I met many people who literally had sold everything they owned and got out of Germany or Australia because they were locked down in true tyranny, and came to Mexico just with a hope that maybe something would work out for their family. So
I think what he's discussing there is really true. A lot of people during COVID, they realized that there was a tyranny unfolding, and so they moved to a place that would be more comfortable for them and their families to have freedom. But this is anecdotal, but from what I know, that a lot of families that did that, they didn't necessarily do it because they're afraid of the control apparatus, but they were looking for comfort. They wanted to be comfortable again. This is such a hassle to deal with, all these lockdowns. I just want to be comfortable. So where can I get that comfort? I'm going to move overseas. I'm going to move to Mexico because it's much more comfortable. These people don't necessarily have the fighting spirit within them. They don't necessarily they're not necessarily coming from the understanding that the government is bad. There's this agenda in place. We have to be careful. And so after COVID has finished, they have forgotten all the lessons that were gained from it. Or, I mean, you should have gained from the experience. So, yeah, I do not have maybe I'm not sure what his expectations are, but me personally, I do not have high expectations that people are going to learn. I have some friends that are very anti tyranny, anti forceful vaccinations. Um, and I am that way too. But we have that difference of opinion. My friend would much be willing to keep quiet about it and hide his opinion. And when he's asked about it, he would rather not talk too much. Whereas for me, I would rather voice my opinion and be quite, you know, upfront about it. I don't really shy away from conflict if I know that that I'm in the right.
I tried to take that knowledge and really, and turn it into this book here.
Well, I'm glad you updated the book because before COVID, certainly things were very different. And after COVID, I think that a lot of people open up their eyes. But, and I think that you're right in saying that they've advanced themselves, but so have people, right? Because we have become much more aware about this. And so we have caught on to a lot of their antics, like the debanking and the censorship on social media. We do have people that are fighting back on it. What do you think the chances? I mean, what you're doing is, I think, extreme, and I don't think most of us can like debank ourselves or not use phones or not, all the things that you're doing. I think most of us need to have, connection, right, to to these things. Um, and so the one thing that I could think of, like just even here, Rumble, just trying to build alternatives and say, we're not going to put up with this. And so we're going to build an alternative. And then you just have to hope that the alternative stays strong and doesn't get sucked in or bought out or.
Absolutely. I mean, so that is the message of the book. In the book, I talk about, so it's broken down in different parts. The first part is a little bit of history for those who don't know what technocracy and the sort of history of that movement and what it meant, which is essentially what we saw during COVID. Trust the experts, the people at the top, the technicians, the experts, the scientists, they're going to run things and they're going to micromanage our lives, and they promise it'll be a utopia. And I essentially argue in the book that even though this philosophy, we're told, sort of fell into the dustbin of history, that I think it's actually been the guiding force, and it is the guiding force for people like Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and others, that they believe that they are above and beyond governments or the people's desires and business, et cetera, and they want to set the agenda. They claim in the name of a better humanity. And so I provide some of that history, and then I discuss what I believe is the answer, which is the philosophy known as agorism or counter economics, which is essentially what you were just talking about. I kind of coined my own term. I call it exit and build. And this is like the idea of exiting from slavery systems. This could be if you do choose to unbank yourself, debank yourself, and then maybe you go from being at, for example, JP Morgan Chase to a local credit union. That's a step in the right direction. And in the book, I kind of provide these steps of, here's maybe your big picture. I'd like to have land and growing my own food and not be dependent on the grocery store. But maybe that's not where you're at right now. So, visiting the farmer's market every weekend and supporting local farmers is a step in that right direction, right? So,
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. The one point where I will disagree with him is technocracy and treating it as though it is something different to fascism, right? Because for me, technocracy and all the other crises, democracy, is just fancy names and fancy labels for describing the ideology that something is based upon, but not necessarily the reality of how it is operated. And for me, I'm much more interested in the way things operate. And the way things operate with the public and private partnership is fascism. So essentially, the people in power in both corporations as well as the government, they're friends with each other. They give each other benefits and essentially make it impossible for anybody outside of their class to be able to thrive. And if you do thrive, you're not allowed to threaten their system. If you threaten their system, you're targeted. And so when he is talking about, moving to credit unions, it only becomes a matter of time before these same people who controlled the banks go, you know what, we're going to start regulating credit unions now. Oh, you know what? Well, if you're going to order or buy your vegetables directly from the farmer, you know what? We're going to add regulations to the farmers so no farmer can survive. We're going to make it so, only big agribusiness can survive, right? And so this isn't really the ultimate solution. I feel like this is the beginning of what you would do, but eventually it needs to get to the stage where you have a whole system on your own. But once you do that, you're going to be attacked for it, right? You're not allowed to build a system on your own, right? It would be like, in the States, all of a sudden you start to use a currency that is not the US dollar. Very, very quickly, you're going to have all the authorities knocking on your door. And if they can't get you for one reason, they'll find another. And so I think eventually it always leads to the same point, which is you have to fight. Eventually you get to the point where you have to fight. And that fight relies on unity, because they will use whatever they can to make it seem like they're the good guys, you're the bad guy. And it works really well. It works really well. Like an example of that would be like tall poppy syndrome in Australia, for example. Anybody that comes up has a different opinion, they will get everybody around them that has like this sort of inherent jealousy of them to start hating on this person. And because they hate on this person, they then won't congregate around this person and unite with him. And the other side that might share the same values as this person who's getting attacked, they start to fear as well. They start to think like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't really voice my opinion. Maybe I shouldn't become a part of this movement, because then, I'll get debanked. Then what am I going to do? I have kids, like that's the whole purpose. But I think eventually what needs to be built is another column, the fifth column, right? That is eventually what will threaten their system, and that is what will lead to the point where we need to fight. And once that happens, everybody has to defend that fifth column, because that fifth column is going to be the one that provides the freedom, right? And the thing is, this entire system is like a house of cards, right? They just have so many things going wrong with it. It's ready to fall apart at the seams, but they come up with ways to further extort us to solve an issue that they have created so that they can keep this endless game going. And what we need to do is say, we're tired of it. You know what? We don't care if we're broken your system. We have this whole other system that we're relying on. We don't need your system anymore. And once that happens, best believe that is when the police, the military will start to be mobilized against the people, right? And this is why unity is so important, because if you are considered a racist group, or you're considered a group that essentially, if you're a group that doesn't have any allies, what's going to happen is your enemies will be united against you, because the government has that power and has the ability to convince people with money so that they can alienate any specific group and attack them one by one. And then it just becomes a matter of time before it's your turn. So in my opinion, what needs to happen, again, I feel like I'm a broken record with this, but unity. Everybody needs to come together, because essentially what the government has done, and this is the basis of everything, the government sows mistrust between everybody so that our single source of trust is the government, and we look towards the government to protect us from each other, right? And so we look to them to solve our problems. But what needs to happen is what people were doing ages ago, which was living in communities, knowing your neighbors, having a neighborhood watch of sorts where you're sharing information among each other. That builds trust, builds community. And that's what we're lacking today.
It's all about taking those concrete steps. You don't have to throw away your phone tomorrow, but you could choose to stop using Google as a search engine right now. You could choose to go to privacytools.io or nomoregoogle.com and look up alternatives to everything that you're doing right now that Google does. There's already alternative companies that exist. And just like with Rumble, a lot of these alternatives you're not going to hear about unless you go search them out. And they need our support. They're not going to be able to sustain themselves and last if they don't have a customer base. And so that's really kind of the message is where can we see the systems that they're trying to build and recognize, okay, staying in that system is not conducive to liberty, to privacy in the long term for me or my family. I need to rethink that. So if I want to avoid the CBDCs, how can I start moving some of my money into, a local credit union or whatever alternatives, a lot of people into silver and gold.
I mean, here's another idea as well. And I think because we've been so propagandized to, and this is strange because, somebody might easily pay for YouTube because it's a good service and you don't have to watch the ads anymore. And that's, I would rather not get annoyed by ads, for example, and it's worth the money, right? A lot of people would more easily do that than, let's say, support a network that they don't think they're going to be using much, such as Rumble, or whatever privacy tool like DuckDuckGo, like the reason why people might not use it is because it's not as convenient, right? And for me, I think it's going to be difficult for you to defeat the convenience of a major platform that has massive dollars behind it. And the reason why there's massive dollars behind it is because of that public-private partnership, right? You have Microsoft, you have Amazon, you have Tesla, you have SpaceX. These are all major government contractors, and they make a ton of money from there. Probably even more than what they make from their commercial activities. Don't quote me on that. But essentially, they have so much dollars to make things convenient, to make their user experience great. And it's difficult to get people to support other products that are more privacy based, but at the same time maybe don't provide that convenience. And I think the thing that's lacking from these products that needs to be added in there, and it's the CEOs that need to get into this, is they need to somehow sweeten the pot. They need to make it so you're not paying a subscription, but you actually feel like you're a part of this movement. So when you're paying and you're investing, then when you're paying the subscription, instead of paying and losing your money, it needs to be seen as an investment. Like, what if you could subscribe to Rumble, and then in that way you are investing in Rumble's future? And if Rumble improves, there's some way that you are going to get a benefit from that. That's what needs to be done, because you need to bring everybody that has that anti-fascism mindset to your side by saying you're a team member with me. I'm not just like Amazon trying to make money off you, but I just have a slightly different perspective on it. No, I am one of you, you are one of me, we are one team. I developed this cool product. How about you invest in it, and then we will move forward. We will push this movement forward together. I think that's what's lacking. I think if that gets implemented in some new ideas, new social networks, for example, and stuff like that, I think that, we could have a real tech revolution on our hands.
And precious metals, stuff like that. I'm not here to give financial advice, but the idea being that you are seeing what's coming. Instead of just sitting there like a deer in headlights, you actually start taking some concrete steps to build something new. And we're not all going to be the ones building the infrastructure. You didn't build Rumble, I didn't build Rumble, but other people come along and they embrace it. They support alternatives and things like that. And so that's kind of the idea, is how can we exit from these slavery systems that we clearly see are being erected in front of us and, for us, around us. How do we start to exit from those systems and build and or support those who are building new ones? And that's really what a lot of my work focuses on. How do we build parallel systems? That's like the work that I promote in the book and through the Freedom Cell Network and some of my other projects, is very much about trying to get people, using the journalism to educate people, get them to realize there's some scary things going on, but at the same time, trying to have a deeper philosophical discussion about how we're going to connect and interface with this technology. And we're all going to have different red lines, of course. Like maybe some things you'll be willing to put up with that I won't, and vice versa. And it's just up to us to have that conversation, because if we don't even think about it, we are going to sleepwalk right into their
Right.
world, because they're moving their agendas forward. We should probably be putting some thought and energy into thinking about what is our 2030 going to look like. And for me, I want privacy, I want bodily autonomy, I want to be around other free people, I want clean food, clean water, and I've got some land, I'm homesteading and stuff like that. But whatever your ideal is, you should probably start thinking about and putting energy into that, because that is not what they have in
Right.
mind for you.
That is not what they have in mind for you. And at the same time, they have a monopoly of force, right? Like, I mean, in the States, you have the Second Amendment, you have the ability to have a gun, right? But in other countries, they've monopolized the force, right? You're not allowed to attack anybody without getting in trouble. Whereas they can pepper spray you, they can shoot you with rubber bullets, they can, barge into your home and arrest you. They can do whatever they want to scare you, but you're not allowed to do the same to them or to anybody else, right? So they've monopolized the force. And when you create a parallel system, there's nothing stopping them from using that force against you, whereas you are not allowed to fight back against them. So, yeah, I really do agree with this guy. We have to create parallel systems. Definitely, that's the way forward, but it's not going to be easy. And another thing about Rumble, because they mentioned Rumble from before, I'm not sure who's behind Rumble. I've heard theories that it's Peter Thiel. Now, if it's Peter Thiel, I mean, it's the same thing, right? And this is my point. Naturally, people are going to think twice about supporting these networks. One, because of the reason I mentioned earlier, which is for the convenience sake. But secondly, it's still a money grab. They're still making money off you. The guy might have a different perspective, but he's still a capitalist that's looking to make money, right? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money, but what I'm saying is, like, when it comes to building a parallel system, when it comes to fighting fascism, there needs to be a little bit of selflessness there. There needs to be the idea that, oh, I'm not just trying to make money, I'm trying to, bring mankind forward and out of this tyranny. And, like, that's where it has to be. If you're going to be a capitalist and really, really push for innovation and all this stuff, I'm on board. But what you have to understand is the capitalism that we know today is not really capitalism. It's already corrupted. It's already, as I said, with the level that this public-private partnership has become, it's essentially that the government can become a kingmaker. Any company it awards a project to, and if it decides to continue that relationship, that person will become a billionaire, right? So, yeah, a lot of factors. I thought this was a really interesting video. This guy has a interesting point of view. I might even have a look at his book. The PDF is free, as he mentioned. Yeah. I think it's interesting that he said all this stuff right before COVID, and it's great that he updated his book, because a lot of people would have been asking for that, seeing as how the tyranny was right in front of our faces during COVID, right? Me personally, that was a turning point as well. It was when I realized that maybe all this stuff that I used to be into, like the conspiracy theories, maybe they're not conspiratorial as I thought they were, but it's actually much more tangible, and it's much more further along than I expected. It was really shocking to me. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to hear your comments on what you think about this guy's point of view. Do you think that it's possible to build parallel systems without, having the government mobilize their forces against you? Do you think that that's the ultimate pathway to our freedom? Or do you think that there's another way? Please subscribe for any future videos. I'm trying my best to upload once a day.